Picture this. You have just wiped out an entire German division, torched a tiger and 2 panthers, but instead of a medal, you have the barrel of a TT pistol shoved in your face, and you are being promised a court-martial. This is the story of the crew of the Hammer, who achieved the impossible and almost paid for it with their lives. What is tactical anatomy, and why did textbooks prefer to stay silent about it? How do you drive through burning gasoline when the temperature inside the tank is melting the rubber? And most importantly, where do you have to hit an invincible tiger with an .85 caliber gun when nothing can penetrate it head-on? In this episode, there are no pretty fairy tales, just dirt, fuel oil, the smell of burnt meat, and cold calculation. You will see how one crew turned the hunters into a herd of victims. Do not change the channel. The final shot in this battle is pure, brutal science that they do not write about in the newspapers.
1944, July, Belarus.
Green Zone, a forest massif west of Minsk. The air here isn't just hot, it is dense, like sludge. The temperature inside the fighting compartment of the T-3485 has crossed 40 degrees Celsius, in the shade. But there is no shade here. There is only scorching armor acting as a solar battery, radiating heat inward into the enclosed space where 4 men sit. The stench is unbearable. A mixture of diesel exhaust, gunpowder fumes ingrained in the upholstery, heated oil, and human sweat. This is the smell of war. Not the kind they write about in the papers, but the kind that stays on your skin even after a bath. Silence. It presses on the eardrums harder than the roar of artillery barrages, because in the roar, you know what to do. In the silence, you wait. And waiting is corrosion for a soldier's psyche. The crew of the tank with the call sign Hammer has been at a concealed position for 4 hours. 4 hours of immobility.
4 hours in an iron box where you cannot stand up to your full height.
The order from headquarters was extremely short and harsh, like the slam of a bolt. Occupy the sector. Strict radio silence. Do not open fire under any circumstances without a special command. Under any circumstances. These 3 words hang in the scorching air heavier than lead. Violating an order during the offensive Operation Bagration is interpreted in only one way. It isn't the guardhouse. It isn't a reprimand. It is a court-martial. At best, a penal battalion, where the average life expectancy of a fighter in an attack is 30 minutes. At worst, execution in front of the formation for failure to perform a combat mission. The tank commander, Lieutenant Kuznetsov, sits in his seat, pressing the headphones of his headset to his ears. On the air, there is only the crackle of static discharge. He knows why such an order was given.
Somewhere out there, beyond the forest, the main forces of the Corps are deploying.
Tank wedges are preparing to close the ring of encirclement. Any premature shot here, in this quadrant, will reveal the ambush position and let German intelligence understand the forest is not empty. This would change the map of the battle. It would force the enemy to redeploy reserves. It would cost the lives of thousands of infantrymen who would go on the attack against a prepared defense, rather than against panicking rear-echelon troops. Kuznetsov looks at his hands. They are covered in oil and soot. His fingers are trembling slightly. This is not the fear of death. This is physiology. The overexertion of muscles that have been in a static position for hours, ready to snap into action at any second. It is hot. The voice of Loder Sidorov sounds hoarse over the internal comms, like grinding metal. The water in the canteen is warm as urine. Cut the chatter, Kuznetsov cuts him off dryly.
The airwaves are for commands only.
Sidorov, A sturdy village guy with broad shoulders sits below in the most uncomfortable place in the tank. His job is weightlifting in hell. A unitary cartridge of 85mm caliber weighs 16 kilograms. There are 56 of them in the ammo rack. When the battle starts, Sidorov will have to snatch these 16 kilograms of steel and explosives from the rack, turn them around in the cramped turret, and ram them into the breech of the gun. The standard is one shot every 5 to 6 seconds. If he hesitates, the crew dies. Right now, he is just sitting, wiping sweat from his forehead with the dirty sleeve of his tunic, looking at the breech of the gun. The gunner, Sergeant Voronov, is glued to the sight. His world is now limited to the narrow field of view of the TSH-16 telescopic articulated sight. 4-power magnification, field of view 16 degrees. Through this optic, the forest looks different. These are not trees and bushes. These are landmarks, ranges, and cover. Voronov is the mathematician of the crew. His task is not just to put the crosshairs on the target. His task is to calculate the lead, account for wind, barrel wear, and air temperature. He knows that the BR-365 armor-piercing shell leaves the barrel at a speed of 792 meters per second. He knows that at a range of 1,000 meters, this shell loses energy, but is still capable of penetrating 100 millimeters of armor at a right angle. But he also knows that German Tigers and Panthers rarely present their armor at a right angle. I see movement. Voronov's voice is calm, almost mechanical. Sector 12, range 1 kilometer 200. Birds took flight. Observe, commands Kuznetsov. Do not twitch. The driver-mechanic, Sergeant Major Petrov, sits in the nose of the hull, walled off from the others. His levers are an extension of his arms. The steering clutches are stiff, requiring strength. The 12-cylinder V234 diesel is silent now, but Petrov feels it with his back. 500 horsepower, ready to roar and tear 32 tons of metal from its place. Petrov knows every vibration of this machine. He knows that the right idler wheel has a bit of play, and on turns, he needs to be careful not to throw a track. The T-34 is not a comfortable limousine. It is a tractor with a cannon. The stiff, Christie-type spring suspension does not forgive mistakes. On the march, it shakes the soul out of you, destroying joints and spines. But right now, it holds the tank motionless. Petrov looks into the periscope. The glass is cloudy, scratched by dust and branches. Visibility is atrocious. The driver's field of view is a narrow slit in the armor, through which he must guide this hulk across rough terrain. Engine has cooled, reports Petrov. Starting will be hard if it is urgent. Oil is thickening.
Copied, answers Kuznetsov.
Silence returns, but now it is taut, like a string before snapping. Somewhere in the distance, at the limit of hearing, a low hum grows. It is not the wind. It is the sound of engines. Heavy, German Maybach engines. A sound that cannot be confused with anything else. It differs from the rumble of Soviet diesels. It is higher pitched, whining at revs, transitioning into a guttural growl. Kuznetsov looks at his watch. The second hand moves in jerks. 1, 2, 3. Time stretches. Every second is a heartbeat. The Hammer tank is a workhorse of war. There is not an ounce of extra comfort here. The weld seams are rough but reliable. The turret is cast, with wall thickness up to 90 millimeters in the frontal part. This is good protection against small-caliber artillery, but against the 88mm gun of a Tiger, this armor is just cardboard. Kuznetsov knows this. Voronov knows this. The whole crew knows this. Their lives depend not on the thickness of the steel, but on reaction speed and the first shot. Whoever sees first lives. Whoever shoots first wins. Whoever misses burns. But they cannot shoot. Orders. The hum of motors becomes louder. The ground begins to tremble barely noticeably. This vibration is transmitted through the tracks to the hull, and from the hull to the bodies of the tankers. "Commander," whispers Sidorov, not pressing the throat microphone button, but in the cramped turret he can be heard anyway. "It is a column, a big one." Kuznetsov raises himself in the hatch, trying not to stick out above the rim. He takes his binoculars. The lenses zoom in on the clearing cutting through the forest. First, dust appears. Gray, acrid dust kicked up by tracks. Then, from around the turn, crushing bushes, a carcass crawls out. Angular, predatory geometry. The characteristic muzzle brake at the end of a long barrel. Interleaved road wheels. Tiger. Heavy tank T6 Tiger. 56 tons of death. Hull front 100 millimeters. Turret front 110 millimeters. Sides 80 millimeters. Its gun punches through a T-34 from a distance of 1.5 kilometers. Clean through. Behind the Tiger comes another machine. Then another. Kuznetsov counts. "Lead is a Tiger," he dictates to himself, but the crew hears every word. Followed by 2 Panthers, Hanomag armored personnel carriers with infantry. 4, 5 trucks. Opals with canvas tops, tankers, refuelers, 11 units of equipment. They are moving in a tight formation, confidently, brazenly. Hatches open. The Germans feel like masters. They do not expect an ambush. They are heading into the rear of the Soviet division, to where the headquarters, depots, and field hospitals are located right now. To where no one is ready to meet heavy tanks. Kuznetsov drops down into the turret. It becomes even hotter inside. Or maybe the blood just rushed to his head. The commander's dilemma is simpler and more terrible than any higher mathematics. Option 1. Follow the order. Let the column pass, maintain camouflage, save himself from the court-martial. But then these 11 machines will emerge in the rear and stage a massacre there. They will crush artillery crews, burn the hospital, destroy the communications hub. Hundreds of people will die. His people. Option 2. Open fire. Violate a direct order from command. Reveal himself. Engage in battle with a single machine against 3 heavy tanks and a platoon of infantry. The chances of survival in such a battle tend toward 0. If they miraculously survive, a military prosecutor awaits them. The charge? Failure to execute a combat order. The sentence? From 10 years in the camps to execution. 11 boxes, Commander. Voronov's voice sounds demanding. He is already turning the aiming flywheels, taking up the slack. The turret turns barely noticeably. The electric drive is off to avoid noise. The manual traverse mechanism is working. They are heading for headquarters. I see. Kuznetsov bites his lip until it bleeds. The salty taste in his mouth is sobering. The regulations say, a commander is obliged to show initiative if the situation demands it. But the same regulations say, the order of a superior is law. These two truths have collided in the lieutenant's head, sparking panic. But there is no place for panic here. No connection with HQ? He asks, knowing the answer. Interference. Deaf as a tank, replies the radio operator. That is, he himself, the commander performing the functions of a radio operator. A decision must be made, now. The Tiger has already pulled up level with their position, but is showing its side, not noticing the T-34 camouflaged in the bushes. Range, 400 meters. Dagger distance. Kuznetsov looks at the back of Petrov's head, at Sidorov's back, at Voronov's profile.
These people trust him with their lives. If he gives the order, fire, they will die here, in this forest, in 5, maybe 10 minutes. Burn alive in a steel capsule. But if he stays silent... Petrov, start her up. Kuznetsov's voice sounds quiet but firm. Sidorov, armor-piercing. Voronov, target, 3rd tank in the column, Panther. Armor-piercing up, the clang of the breech block sounds like a sentence. Why the 3rd one, Commander? Voronov doesn't argue. He clarifies the mission parameters. We won't penetrate the lead one right away. We'll just make noise. But if we light up the center, they'll stall. We'll trap them on the road. Copied. Target Panther. Range 400. Lead 0. Heavy breathing of the crew is audible in the headphones. The fear of the court-martial is gone. It has been displaced by another fear. Not being fast enough. Not turning the turret in time. Not catching the side of the enemy machine in the crosshairs in time. Not shooting first. The war shrinks to the size of a vision slit. The whole world ceases to exist. No more mom, no home, no plans for the future. There are only the crosshairs of the sight, the trembling hands of the loader, and the cold steel of the shell. "Ready!" screams Sidorov. "Fire!" commands Kuznetsov. Recoil. 85 millimeters of steel and explosives leave the barrel. The tank shudders with its whole hull, as if it took a sledgehammer blow to the forehead. The gun breech flies back with a clang, spitting a smoking casing onto the floor of the fighting compartment. At that moment, the air inside the turret vanishes for a fraction of a second. It is replaced by the acrid, sour smell of burnt gunpowder. The fan on the turret roof hums, trying to pull out the gases, but it cannot keep up. Smoke stings the eyes, settles as bitterness in the throat. But the crew does not notice this. Emotions are switched off. Only physiology and learned reflexes work. The shell covers 400 meters in half a second. This is faster than sound. The crew of the German Panther, 3rd in the column, dies without even hearing the shot. The armor-piercing slug hits the side of the German machine. The impact angle is close to 90 degrees, the ideal geometry of death. German side armor, 45 millimeters thick, is not designed for such a hit from dagger range. The shell stitches through the steel like a hot needle through wax. Kinetic energy converts to thermal. Inside the Panther, the ammunition load instantly ignites. An explosion of monstrous force tears the turret of the German tank off the turret ring. The multi-ton structure flies into the air, flips over, and falls with a crash onto the road, blocking the way for those coming behind. The hull of the tank turns into a torch. Fire shoots out of the hatches in high pillars. The road is cut. "Hit!" screams Voronov, not tearing himself away from the sight. His voice trembles with adrenaline, but his hands continue to work with surgical precision. "High explosive!" yells Kuznetsov, drowning out the engine noise and the ringing in his ears. "The tail! Fuel trucks! Faster!" Infernal calisthenics begin in the fighting compartment. Loader Sidorov, choking in the smoke, dives for the ammo rack. 16 kilograms of death seem like a feather in his hands. Back and arm muscles work at the tearing limit. He rams the unitary cartridge into the breech. The clang of the sliding wedge breech block sounds like music. "Ready," he exhales. "Fire!" The tank jerks again. The second shot flies toward the tail of the column, to where the trucks and fuel tankers are frozen. The drivers of these vehicles have not yet understood what happened. They see an explosion ahead, see the burning Panther, but the inertia of thought forces them to hit the brakes, not jump into the ditch. This mistake costs them their lives. The high-explosive fragmentation shell hits the tank of the rear fuel refueler. The explosion isn't just loud, it is volumetric. Hundreds of liters of gasoline instantly turn into a fiery cloud, covering the rear of the column. It is real napalm. Fire spills across the road, igniting neighboring trucks, canvas tops, trees. A wall of black, greasy smoke rises to the tops of the pines. The trap has snapped shut. This is the tactical anatomy of a battle. Surgical amputation of limbs. The head of the column, the heavy tiger and 2 panthers, is cut off from the tail by the burning hulk of their own tank. The tail is destroyed and turned into a wall of fire. And in the center, in a death sack, armored personnel carriers with infantry, staff cars, and supply trucks are pinned. They have no room to maneuver. The forest road is too narrow. Swamp on the left, dense forest on the right. Even a passenger car couldn't turn around here, let alone bulky half-track transporters. The Germans are in a panic. They do not see the enemy. The green wall of the forest is silent. Only flashes of death fly out from one point. To them, it looks like an air raid, or the work of an entire anti-tank battery. It does not even occur to them that they are being shot up by a single crew that violated regulations. "Armor piercing," commands Kuznetsov. "At the APCs, hit the center, mix them with the dirt." Inside the hammer, time flows differently. Outside is chaos, screams, explosions. Inside is an assembly line. Sidorov, bend, grab casing, jerk, ram, punch the breech to ensure locking, recoil to the side to avoid getting hit in the chest by the recoil guard. Voronov, rotating the flywheels, searching for a target, aligning the sight chevron with the silhouette of the enemy machine, calculating lead. Shot. Petrov, holding the machine on the brakes, controlling engine temperature. He is blind. He sees nothing in his burrow, but he hears commands and feels every shot. In the fighting compartment, the temperature rises every second. Ventilation cannot cope with the powder gases. Eyes water, breath catches. The tankers' faces are covered with a black, oily film of soot, cut through by tracks of sweat. Hands slip on metal, but they cannot stop. 3 seconds per shot, an eternity waiting for the return strike. "Fourth is burning," reports Voronov. Another armored personnel carrier, taking a hit in the side, falls apart. The infantry that tried to hide behind its armor is swept away by the blast wave and shrapnel. Now Hammer's task is blinding. The German tanks at the head of the column begin to react. The turret of the lead Tiger begins to turn slowly, with the heavy hum of hydraulics. It is searching for a target, but in the forest, a tank is blind. Without infantry to point out to the gunner where the gun is firing from, a Tiger is just a nearsighted mountain of armor. "The infantry!" screams Kuznetsov. "Don't let them lift their heads!" High explosive. Shells burst among the trucks and armored personnel carriers. Shrapnel mows down German grenadiers trying to go prone in roadside ditches. This is no longer a battle. This is a slaughter. The arithmetic of survival works against the Germans. The density of fire in the narrow corridor is such that the infantry has no chance to organize observation and target designation. Kuznetsov looks into the commander's panorama. The picture shakes from the shots. He sees figures of people in gray uniforms rushing about in the smoke. He sees one of the Panthers, the second one, trying to reverse, but it runs into the burning wreck of the third machine. Tracks grind, tearing out chunks of turf. The engine roars. The panic of the driver is obvious. "They are blind," states Kuznetsov. "Voronov, shift fire. 5th target, staff bus." The lieutenant understands. Right now they are destroying the brain of the column. Signalmen, officers, maps. Every shell fired now saves the lives of Soviet soldiers out there, ahead. But this cannot go on forever. The Tiger has almost turned its turret. Its long barrel, looking like a telegraph pole, gropes through the bushes. It does not see Hammer yet, but it already knows the direction. The sector is narrowing. "Driver!" Kuznetsov hits the comms button. "Ready for maneuver! The dance is about to start." "Ready," responds Petrov. The diesel roars, gaining revs. They violated the order. They revealed themselves. Now, by all laws of tactics, they should be destroyed by massed fire. 1 tank against 10 remaining. But the crew of Hammer does not think about statistics. There is no fear. There is only cold calculation and the understanding, as long as the tiger doesn't see the muzzle flash, they are gods of war. As soon as it sees, they are corpses. Sidorov rams another shell. His movements have become jerky, but the speed hasn't dropped. On the floor, a mountain of spent casings is already ringing, making it hard to stand. There is almost nothing to breathe. Carbon monoxide accumulates in the blood, causing slight dizziness and ringing in the ears. This state is similar to intoxication. Combat intoxication. Shot! The staff bus blows to smithereens. Papers, maps, uniforms fly into the air, mixing with fire. And then the forest explodes with a return crash. The lead tiger has fired. The 88mm shell passed above the turret of Hammer, splitting a century-old pine behind them with a crack. The tree began to topple with a terrifying creak. The ground shook so hard, Voronov's teeth clicked against the site. "Spotted!" screams Kuznetsov. "Petrov, reverse! Get off the line! Move it!" The second phase of the battle begins. Statics are over. Now the crew's life depends on the skill of the driver-mechanic and the reliability of the gearbox. The tank jerks back sharply, tracks clanging. A branch whips against the periscopes. Hammer dives into the depth of the forest, changing position. The first round went to them. The center of the column is destroyed. The tail is burning. The enemy is disoriented. But the main predator, the tiger, has woken up, and he is very angry. Now it is a duel, not for destruction, but for speed. Speed of thinking and speed of movement. "Load armor-piercing!" commands Kuznetsov as the tank breaks through bushes, flanking the Germans. "We're going to hit the beast." Inside the tank, there is a racket. The crew is tossed from side to side. Every impact against the armor results in a bruise. But there is no pain. Pain will come later, when the adrenaline drops. Right now, there is only the target. 11 targets. -3. 8 left. And one of them is deadly. The V-234 engine roars at the limit of 3,000 RPM, drowning out even the roar of explosions outside. The T-34 tank is 32 tons of inertia that do not want to stop, and want to change direction even less. To make this Hulk dance in the forest requires not just strength, it requires fury. Driver-mechanic Sergeant Major Petrov is the most important person in the crew right now. The commander picks the target, the gunner pulls the trigger, but it is the driver who decides if the tank will exist in the next second. Petrov does not see the battle. His periscopes are clogged with mud and pine needles. He drives the machine by ear, by the commander's commands, and by an animal instinct that is developed only by the 4th year of war. His world is the 2 main steering clutch levers, the main clutch pedal, and the gearshift gate. The T-34 has no power steering. Every turn is a physical effort of 15 to 20 kilograms on the lever. To shift gears on the move, one must possess the precision of a surgeon and the strength of a blacksmith. Otherwise, the gears will simply shear, and the tank will turn into a stationary target. "Right, 30!" screams Kuznetsov into the throat mic. Petrov yanks the right lever toward himself, simultaneously depressing the pedal. The track locks. The left one continues to dig, biting into the forest floor with its grousers. The tank skids around, knocking down young birches with its stern. The trees break with a dry crack resembling gunshots.
Inside the hull, this sound is amplified by the armor, creating the impression that the tank is falling apart. In the fighting compartment, centrifugal force chaos reigns. Loader Sidorov is thrown from the breech to the ammo rack. He slams his shoulder against the shell casing catcher stand, but doesn't even wince. Pain is a signal there is no time for right now. Halt! The commander's command hits the ears. The tank dips its nose. The Christie suspension compresses to the stop, absorbing the colossal inertia of braking. The hull is still rocking, but Voronov is already catching a new victim in the sight. "Short!" yells Kuznetsov. This means a stop for 3 seconds, exactly enough for the gunner to align the sight chevron with the target, while the hull oscillations die down completely. Shooting on the move from a T-34 is a lottery. The gun has no stabilizer. To hit, you must freeze. Shot! Another high-explosive fragmentation shell goes toward the German column. This time, the target is a group of infantry trying to deploy a PaK-40 anti-tank gun. The Germans are acting competently, by the book, but they are too slow. The shell explodes a meter from the gun carriage, turning the crew and the gun into a pile of twisted metal. Forward! Left! Gas! Petrov throws the machine into a dash again. The diesel chokes on diesel fuel, spewing clouds of black, oily smoke from the exhaust pipe. This smoke mixes with dust and the soot of fires, creating an ideal screen. Hammer does not stand still for a second. It moves along a broken trajectory, tracing insane zigzags between century-old pines. A shot from one position. A dash 50 meters to the left. Shot. A dash 30 meters deeper into the forest. Shot. To the Germans pinned on the narrow road, it looks like an attack by an entire tank platoon. They see a flash on the right and immediately receive a shell from the left. They turn their turrets toward the sound of the shot, but no one is there anymore. Just swaying branches and settling dust. Their return fire flies into the void. Shells from 37mm anti-aircraft guns, which they are trying to use against ground targets, shear bushes where Hammer was 10 seconds ago. It is an illusion of an army. One crew, working like an assembly line of death, creates a fire density comparable to a battery. But the price of this illusion is extreme wear on equipment and people. Inside the tank, the temperature approaches 60 degrees. The fan on the turret roof circulates scorching air poisoned by fumes, bringing no relief. Sweat floods eyes, stinging the mucous membranes. The tunics on the fighters are soaked through. You could wring them out. Hands slip on the metal of shells and flywheels. "Coolant 95!" croaks Petrov. "Engine is boiling over, Commander!" "Endure!" responds Kuznetsov. "If we stop, we cool down forever." The V2 diesel is working in a mode that designers would call barbaric. Fuel consumption on such dashes is monstrous. Liters fly out the pipe every 100 meters. Oil, overheated to critical temperatures, loses viscosity. Pressure in the system drops. The heart of the tank works on the verge of a heart attack. But it works. Another maneuver. Petrov flies into a pit hidden by ferns. The tank is tossed up. The loader's head meets the armor of the turret roof with a dull thud. Sidorov falls to his knees, dropping the shell on the floor. "Alive!" Kuznetsov screams. "Alive!" Sidorov shakes his head, shaking the red veil from his eyes. He grabs the 16-kilogram slug from the floor like a feather. Adrenaline is the best painkiller. "Loaded. Target ammunition truck. Range 300. Fire!" The explosion of ammunition in the German truck looks like a volcanic eruption. The detonation of crates of shells tears the vehicle to shreds, scattering deadly fireworks in all directions. The blast wave knocks down trees at the edge of the clearing. The Germans are demoralized. They have stopped understanding where the threat is coming from. Panic is a chain reaction. Drivers of surviving vehicles abandon their steering wheels and run into the forest, falling under the fire of their own machine gunners who shoot at any rustle. Coordination is lost.
Officers scream commands, but no one hears them in this hell.
Kuznetsov tears himself away from the observation instruments for a second. He sees the whole picture of the battle. Burning equipment, rushing figures, black smoke. They did the impossible. They stopped the column. They turned a formidable Wehrmacht combat unit into a pile of burning junk. But there is no euphoria. There is a cold understanding. Ammunition is melting away. Less than half the shells remain in the racks. Fuel is enough for another half hour of this tempo. And most importantly, the enemy is not an idiot. The regulations write, "Initiative is punishable by execution." In this case, the initiative of the hammer crew is punished by the attention of the most dangerous predator in this forest. Amidst the chaos and panic, one machine maintains icy calm, the lead tiger. Its commander is an experienced wolf. He stopped rotating the turret. He stopped shooting blindly. He understood the tactics of the Russian tank. He is not looking for the flash. He is looking at the clearings. He is calculating the pattern. The Tiger slowly reverses, covering its hull behind a knocked-out armored personnel carrier. It occupies a position blocking the only possible escape route for Hammer. It waits. Its 88mm look at the point where the T-34 should appear in a minute, if it continues its carousel. Kuznetsov feels this with his back. The commander's intuition, sharpened to the limit, screams danger. The rhythm of the battle has changed. Return fire has died down. This is a bad sign. It is the calm before the execution. "Petrov, stop the machine," Kuznetsov commands sharply. The tank freezes in dense bushes. The engine shifts to idle, rumbling discontentedly. "Why are we stopped?" asks Voronov, wiping sweat from his face with a shaking hand. "He's waiting for us," says Kuznetsov quietly. "The Tiger. He figured us out.
If we come out at the old point, we'll take a slug in the side."
So what do we do? Sidorov sits on the floor, leaning his back against the ammo rack. His chest is heaving, greedily swallowing the poisoned air. "We change the rules." Kuznetsov looks at the map glued to the tablet. "We won't go left. We'll go straight." "Straight?" Petrov in the headset sounds incredulous. "At the Tiger? Head on? Commander, that's suicide. Our 85 won't take his front even at point blank. It's like throwing pebbles at a safe." "Won't take the front," agrees Kuznetsov. "But we won't hit the front. We're going to ram." Silence hangs in the fighting compartment. Ramming. The last argument. The weapon of despair. "Joke," Kuznetsov grins harshly, but his eyes remain cold. "Not a ram. We'll go through the smoke, where the fuel trucks are burning. He doesn't expect us from the tail. He expects us from the flank. We'll slip through the fire and come up in his rear." "Through the fire?" asks Petrov.
Will the tracks hold? Tracks of steel, they'll hold. But the rubber on the road wheels might burn off. But that's better than a hole in the turret. "Logistics are simple," mutters Voronov, sticking to the sight again. "Either we burn outside or inside. Outside there are more chances." "Petrov," the commander's voice becomes steel. "Listen to my command. Full speed ahead. Straight through the burning column. Maximum speed. Do not stop under any circumstances. Hit someone. Crush them. Get stuck? Push. We need to slip through 300 meters of hell." "Understood." The driver's voice is calm. He has already resigned himself. Hold on. It's about to get hot. Literally. The diesel howls, reaching maximum RPM. The tank tears off, breaking bushes, and flies out onto the road. Straight into the wall of fire and black smoke, where the remains of the German rear are burning out. The illusion of an army has vanished. One real machine remains, rushing into the devil's maw.
The world beyond the armor turns into a glowing crucible. Tank Hammer enters the zone of solid fire. This is not a metaphor. The T-34 literally rams a burning fuel truck, smearing flaming fuel across its frontal armor. Visibility drops to 0. Periscopes are flooded with black soot and greasy fire. Inside the fighting compartment, the temperature jumps to 70 degrees. The air burns the lungs. The rubber tires of the road wheels begin to smoke. The melting point of rubber has been passed. "Hold course!" croaks Kuznetsov, clamping the throat mic with his hand because sweat makes the skin slippery and contact is lost. "Only straight!" Petrov drives the machine blindly. He orients himself only by the impacts of the hull against obstacles. Impact on the right, hit a truck. Grind on the bottom, ran over motorcycle debris. The tank moves like an icebreaker, only instead of ice, here there is burning iron and human bodies. The tracks grind up everything that gets in the way. The sounds outside are terrifying. Crunching, bursting metal, the howl of flames. But the crew hears only the roar of their own diesel, working to the breaking point. These 300 meters are the longest of their lives. Seconds stretch into hours. The upholstery inside has heated up so much that an accidental touch with a bare hand leaves a second-degree burn. The shells in the ammo rack are heating up. This is a critical moment. If the temperature of the gunpowder inside the casings reaches the flash point, the crew will vaporize before they even have time to get scared. And suddenly, light. The tank bursts out of the smokescreen like a cork from a bottle. Before them is a clean stretch of road. Behind is the wall of fire they just exited. And ahead, just 200 meters away, stands he, the Tiger. The German commander did not expect such audacity. His turret is turned to 3 o'clock, toward the forest where the fire came from a minute ago. He is expecting the enemy from the flank. He does not believe the Russians would risk driving through hell. But they drove through. Now Hammer is in the so-called dead zone of the Tiger's rear sector. But the German machine is not standing still. It begins a turn. "Target in sight!" screams Voronov. "Range 200! Rear! Halt!" commands Kuznetsov. The tank dips its nose, stopping. Inertia throws the men forward, straps digging into shoulders. The duel of mechanics begins. The Tiger's turret weighs 11 tons. To turn it 180 degrees using the hydraulic drive requires about 60 seconds at low engine RPM. If the German driver gives it gas, the time will shorten, but it is still seconds. Precious, heavy seconds. The 88mm barrel, this deadly trunk, begins to crawl slowly toward Hammer. "Armor piercing! In the rear!" commands Kuznetsov. "No!" unexpectedly objects Voronov. It is insubordination, but it is the voice of a professional. "He has a slope there. It'll ricochet. Wait for the side." It is madness. Waiting while the enemy turns his gun toward you, but Voronov is right. The Tiger's rear plate has a slope, and from this distance, considering the German's hull turn, the angle of impact might be too acute. The armor-piercing shell will simply slide off the steel, leaving a scratch, and fly into the sky. And there won't be a second chance. 88mm don't miss from 200 meters. The Tiger turns not just the turret, but the hull too. It presents its side at an angle, trying to diamond, increase the effective thickness of the armor. "Wait," whispers Kuznetsov. His hair is turning gray. "Right now." The muzzle of the German gun is looking almost right at them. The black pupil of death dilates. Another couple of degrees, and the Tiger gunner will press the firing pedal. Voronov looks into the sight.
He doesn't see a tank. He sees geometry. The thickness of the Tiger's whole side armor is 80 millimeters. Turret side is also 80. The lower part of the side behind the wheels is 60. The most vulnerable place is the section between the upper track run and the fender sponson. Fuel tanks and ammo racks are located there. But the German continues to turn. The impact angle changes. Now the effective armor is already over 100 millimeters. 85 millimeters of Soviet shell might not take it. A mistake by the German is needed, or perfect precision. "Turret ring," exhales Voronov. "Hitting under the turret." This is the joint zone, the place where the rotating turret connects to the hull. There is a microscopic gap covered by an armored ring. If you hit there, the shell will jam the turret. With luck, it will penetrate and go inside the fighting compartment. The German tank freezes for a moment to shoot. This is that same short stop that both they and we were taught. Shot! The T-34 shudders. The shell covers 200 meters instantly. Time compresses to a point. Impact, sparks, a sheaf of fire on the Tiger's armor. The shell does not hit the turret ring. It hits slightly lower, in the upper part of the side, right under the base of the turret. But the distance is too small. The kinetic energy of the shell at 200 meters is colossal. It doesn't pierce the armor through in the classic sense. Spalling occurs. Chunks of steel break off from the inner side of the Tiger's armor, turning into shrapnel. But the main thing is the shock wave. An impact of such force likely tears off the mountings of mechanisms inside. The Tiger is silent. There is no return shot. "Didn't penetrate!" screams Sidorov in despair, already ramming the next shell. "Calm down!" Voronov's voice is icy. "Watch the smoke." A thin stream of gray smoke escapes from the open hatch of the Tiger's commander's cupola. Then it becomes thicker, blacker. Inside the German machine, what tankers call welding has occurred. Red-hot armor fragments and scale hit the shell casings in the ready rack. The gunpowder ignited. Pressure inside the Tiger jumps to hundreds of atmospheres. The driver's and radio operator's hatches are blown out from the inside like corks from champagne. Pillars of fire 3 meters long shoot out of the openings. This is the powder charges burning. Detonation hasn't happened yet. This is just a fire. The crew inside is doomed. The temperature there is now 1,500 degrees. A second. 2. Explosion. The multi-ton turret of the Tiger jumps up, tearing away from the hull, and with a heavy, dull crash slides sideways, crushing the track. The hull bulges from the inside. Road wheels fly apart. The monster is dead. Physics defeated armor. A ringing silence descends on the forest. Only the crackling of burning metal and the hum of the fan in Hammer's turret, continuing to suck out gunpowder fumes, can be heard. "Done," states Voronov. He tears himself away from the sight and wipes his eyes with the back of his hand. The hand leaves a black streak on his face. Kuznetsov slowly slides down into his seat. His legs won't hold him. The adrenaline that kept him toned for the last half hour leaves, leaving behind emptiness and wild weakness. His hands begin to shake so much he cannot unbutton his holster. "Cut the engine," he commands in a whisper. Petrov turns the key. The roar of the diesel cuts off.
And this sound, the sound of silence, turns out to be more terrifying than the roar of battle. Because in this silence comes the realization of what they just did. They destroyed a tank column, the 4 of them, in one tank, violating a direct order from command. Kuznetsov looks at his watch. The battle lasted 22 minutes.
22 minutes that cost the lives of probably 50 German soldiers and officers, and which saved, how many? 1,000 of their own? 2,000? The hatch opens with a strained creak. Fresh forest air bursts into the turret, mixed with the smell of burning and singed meat. Kuznetsov climbs out onto the armor. He sways like a drunk. Around is hell. The forest road is littered with burning iron. The tiger is belching black, oily smoke. A little further, the panthers are burning out. Debris, casings, some papers are scattered everywhere. Petrov climbs out of the driver's hatch. He falls onto the grass and greedily gasps for air. His face is gray, eyes sunken. "Water," he croaks. Sidorov hands him a canteen. The water in it is hot, almost boiling, but Petrov drinks it in greedy gulps, spilling it on his tunic. They are alive. This is a fact the brain refuses to accept immediately. They should have died 10 times in these 22 minutes. By statistics, by probability theory, by tactical technical characteristics, they are corpses. But Hammer stands. Sooty, with scratched paint, dents on the fenders, smoking rubber on the road wheels. But whole. The armor is not pierced. "Commander," Voronov sits on the turret, legs dangling. He lights a smoke, breaking matches with trembling fingers. "They're going to shoot us, aren't they?" Kuznetsov looks at him. The lieutenant's gaze is empty, glassy. "Maybe," he says, "but not today." In the distance, the sound of a motorcycle is heard, the growing rattle of a 2-stroke engine. This is not a German sound. It is an M72. Courier. Kuznetsov straightens his belt, checks the buttons on his tunic. The habit of being an officer takes over fatigue. "Crew, clean yourselves up," he commands. His voice is weak but firm. "Report on ammo and fuel consumption. Prepare for report." The motorcycle flies out from around the turn, weaving between craters. In the sidecar sits a communications officer with captain's shoulder boards. A soldier is driving. They brake sharply, kicking up a fountain of dust. The captain jumps out of the sidecar before it fully stops. His face is twisted with rage. He runs toward the tank, unbuttoning his TT holster on the move. "Who is the commander?" he yells, so hard veins bulge on his neck. "Who opened fire?" Kuznetsov jumps down from the armor. His feet touch the ground heavily, as if filled with lead. He takes 3 steps toward the captain and snaps his hand to his headset. "Guards, Lieutenant Kuznetsov." "You!" The captain flies up to him close, spraying spittle. "You realize what you've done, son of a bitch. You blew the operation. You unmasked the position. Court-martial. I'll shoot you personally." Kuznetsov is silent. He stands at attention, looking over the captain's shoulder, to where the hulk of the tiger is burning out. The captain falls silent, choking on his scream. He shifts his gaze to where the lieutenant is looking. The captain's eyes widen. He slowly turns his head, surveying the panorama of the slaughter. Burning trucks, armored personnel carriers torn to shreds, 2 panthers with their noses buried in the ground, and the tiger with the torn-off turret. The captain's hand gripping the pistol lowers. "This," the captain's voice breaks into a whisper. "How many machines was that?" 11, Comrade Captain, Kuznetsov reports dryly. 1 heavy tank, 2 mediums, 4 armored personnel carriers, supply trucks.
The column was heading for quadrant 1206. To HQ, mutters the captain. He looks at Kuznetsov with a different gaze now. There is no rage in it. There is fear and disbelief. How 4 men could create this? Guilty, comrade captain, continues Kuznetsov. Radio silence order violated. Ready to surrender weapon. The captain looks at him, then at the tank, then again at the graveyard of German equipment. He slowly puts the pistol back in the holster. Surrender weapon? He asks again. And who's going to fight? Pushkin? He takes off his cap and wipes his forehead with a handkerchief. Write a report, Lieutenant, in detail. Who, how, where you hit. Draw diagrams. I'll always have time to shoot you. But first the division commander has to see this. He turns to his driver. Connection with HQ, urgent. Relay. Quadrant cleared. No threat of breakthrough. Have artillery move out. Kuznetsov exhales. Air leaves his lungs with a noise. They won twice. First the enemy, then the regulations. But the war didn't end. This was just one battle. One episode in an endless series of deaths and resurrections. Driver-mechanic Petrov strokes the armor of Hammer with a dirty palm. The metal is cooling, crackling. Thanks, brother, he whispers to the iron. And it seems the tank answers him with a quiet sigh of the cooling engine. This battle did not make it into the official reports of the Soviet Information Bureau. There they spoke of breaking the front, liberating cities, thousands of prisoners. A local skirmish in Forest Quadrant 1206 remained at the level of battalion reporting. But for tank schools, albeit unofficially, this episode became a textbook example of ambush anatomy. Lieutenant Kuznetsov sits on the armor, tablet on his knees. His hands, black from soot and oil, struggle to hold the chemical pencil. He writes the report. Paper demands dry language devoid of emotion. There is no place for words like fear, risk, or miracle here. There are only coordinates, time, ammunition expenditure, and a list of destroyed targets. I made the decision to open fire in violation of radio silence due to a clear threat to rear communications. These lines are harder than the shots. Paper is also a battlefield, where one wrong word can lead to a court-martial faster than an enemy shell. But the captain, the very one who threatened execution, has already left, taking the battle diagram with him. He understands. Winners aren't judged as long as they are needed at the front. While the commander writes, the crew does what constitutes the essence of war between battles, servicing the mechanism. Tank Hammer is cooling down, making sounds like the groans of a tired beast. Metal heated to extreme temperatures contracts, clicking at the plate joints. Driver mechanic Petrov lies under the belly, inspecting the road wheels. The rubber tires on 2 road wheels have burned completely, exposing the steel. This is the result of that very breakthrough through the wall of fire of the fuel trucks. Now on the march, the tank will rattle like a freight train, unmasking itself for kilometers. But it is mobile, the torsion bars held. The transmission, though howling, transmits torque. Loader Sidorov and gunner Voronov accept the ammunition replenishment. A supply truck that pulled up unloaded crates right onto the grass. The shells are heavy, cold, slippery with grease. They need to be wiped with a rag, fuses inspected, stowed in the racks. This is monotonous, heavy physical labor. Bend over 56 times, lift 16 kilograms, pass into the hatch, accept, stow. Muscles clogged with lactic acid after the battle ache. Backs won't straighten. But they do it silently, at the pace of an assembly line, because an empty tank is just a coffin on tracks. Meanwhile, a group of technical officers from the repair battalion arrives at the battle site. Their task is to evaluate trophies and draw up write-off acts. They walk among the burning hulks of German machines like pathologists in a morgue. One of them, an elderly engineer major, stands for a long time near the destroyed Tiger. He runs a finger along the chip on the armor, where Voronov's last shell hit. "Filigree," he mutters, shaking his head. "1 chance in 1,000. From the point of view of physics, destroying a Tiger with an .85 caliber in such a projection is an anomaly. The impact angle, kinetic energy, hardness of German cemented steel, everything spoke against the Soviet shell. But a factor worked that is not accounted for in formulas: metal fatigue and human will. The strike hit a stress point, causing internal spalling and detonation of powder charges. This is not luck. This is the result of intuitive calculation when the gunner feels the enemy machine like his own. The tactics used by the Hammer crew would later receive the unofficial name Joint Strike. In academies, they taught to hit the head, destroy the commander or the strongest machine. Kuznetsov flipped this logic. He first immobilized the column by destroying the rear and third in line, creating a traffic jam. Then he blinded it, knocking out infantry and optics, and only then, when the giant was left alone, deprived of support and maneuver, did he finish it off. It was a lesson in the engineering approach to killing. The tank here acted not as a duelist, but as an instrument of isolation. The Germans lost not because they had bad armor, but because they lost systematicity. 11 powerful units turned into 11 lonely targets in a narrow corridor. But for the crew itself, these high matters do not matter. For them, the battle ended when the adrenaline dropped. Now, the phase of apathy has set in. This is a protective reaction of the psyche. They do not feel like heroes. They feel like workers who have plowed a triple shift in a hot shop. Voronov smokes, sitting on the turret. His hands are still trembling slightly, gunner's tremor. He looks at the forest, which just an hour ago was green and alive, and has now turned into a lunar landscape with black stumps and craters.
"Hey, Commander," he asks hoarsely. "Will they give medals?" Kuznetsov tears himself away from the report. He looks at his people, dirty, exhausted, with inflamed eyes. "They'll give diesel," he answers. "And they gave shells. Be thankful it's not a court-martial. Medals are for those who draw arrows on maps at HQ. For us, it's work. This is the whole truth of war. Heroism here is not a beautiful pose against the background of an unfurled banner. Heroism is reload speed. It is the ability not to sleep for 3 days. It is the ability to clean the gun breech when fingers won't bend from fatigue. It is the readiness to climb back into an iron box permeated with the smell of death and wait for a shot again. A fuel tanker pulls up. The hose is pulled to the tank filler necks. The smell of diesel overpowers the smell of burning. Petrov watches the level. The tank eats a lot. That frantic dance in the forest took almost half a tank. "Full!" shouts Petrov. The hose is removed. Hatches are battened down. Kuznetsov folds the tablet. The report is written. He will pass it with the courier. And now, a new order. The radio comes alive. The airwaves break through the crackle of interference. The battalion commander's voice, distant and distorted, dictates new coordinates. The offensive is developing. Tank wedges are moving on Minsk. Somewhere out there, ahead, are new barriers, new tigers, new batteries. "Mount up!" The command sounds mundane. The crew dives into the hatches. Habitual movements. Foot on the bracket, jerk, body slips into the narrow opening. Inside it is just as hot, but now this heat seems like home. The tank is their home, their fortress, and their probable grave. A capsule where the decision of one saves or kills four. The engine sneezes, spewing a cloud of blue smoke, and hums evenly. Tank hammer turns on one track, grinding humus mixed with ash. It slowly crawls out onto the road, driving around the smoking hulk of the German Tiger. The turret of the Soviet tank is turned forward. The muzzle brake looks east. They do not look back. Looking at the results of your work is bad luck. This battle showed the main thing. Regulations are written in blood. Every line of the combat manual is paid for by thousands of lives in 41 and 42. It says there, "Do not violate orders." But there, between the lines, another rule is written, the highest rule of war: win. Sometimes, to fulfill your duty to the motherland, you need to violate the commander's order. But the price of this choice is your head. Lieutenant Kuznetsov bet his head and the heads of his crew, and won. Today. Tomorrow will be a new day. New arithmetic of survival. New angles of impact of shell on armor. But this specific section of forest, this crossroads, remained theirs. Tracks clang, picking up speed. The tank disappears into the thicket, leaving behind a trail of dust and glory none of them asked for. War is heavy, dirty work, and they just did it well, without defects. End of transmission. War is not just shooting. It is primarily logistics and resources. The victory of the Hammer crew in Forest Quadrant 1206 became a tactical triumph, but physics took its toll. Any mechanism has a strength limit, and in that battle, the T-34 scraped the bottom of that limit. After the battle comes the phase that textbooks call restoration of combat capability, and at the front, resuscitating the iron. The tank was driven to the battalion rear, to a forest belt where the repair truck was located. Mechanics, men who had seen it all with oil ingrained in their skin, walked around the machines silently. Hammer's damage read like a map of the battle. The rubber tires on the second and third road wheels were completely missing. They didn't just burn, they flowed off, exposing metal which had managed to flatten against the track pins during the march. The drive sprocket had a chipped tooth, a consequence of a sharp jerk when turning in place. But the worst was hidden inside. The V2 engine, the heart of the machine, was worn to a critical state. That very regime of extreme RPMs that allowed the tank to dance between shells cost it half its engine life. The oil in the crankcase had turned into black tar with metal shavings. This was the engine's blood, shavings from crankshaft bearings. Piston rings had collapsed. Compression dropped. The tank was alive, but it was an invalid. The crew looked no better. Lieutenant Kuznetsov sat on a shell crate staring at a single point. Medics call this combat psychic trauma, but in 1944 no such diagnoses were made. It was simply called fatigue. His hands, which an hour ago held the map firmly, now lived their own life. The tremor was so strong he couldn't roll a cigarette. Tobacco spilled on his knees. This was the nervous system shedding the overload. The body's chemistry, supersaturated with adrenaline and cortisol, was glitching. Loader Sidorov was asleep. He slept right on the ground, under the track of his tank, curled up in a ball. He fell asleep instantly as soon as he climbed out of the hatch. His body, which had moved almost a ton of iron in 20 minutes, shut down. In his sleep, he flinched and jerked his shoulder. His muscles continued to load the gun. This battle went down in history not as a feat, but as a precedent. Later, when HQ analysts broke down Kuznetsov's report, they saw a clear structure in the chaos of that battle.
This became the basis for an unspoken tactical doctrine: hit the joints, not the heads. Before this, they taught to look for the commander. Kuznetsov showed it is more effective to look for weak links. First rule of the new arithmetic: isolation. By destroying the rear and central vehicles, the crew turned the column into a herd. They deprived the Germans of maneuver geometry.
A tank without movement is a pillbox. A pillbox in the forest without infantry cover is a target. Second rule: information blockade. By knocking out infantry and observers, Hammer blinded the enemy. The Tiger tank has excellent optics, but they look where the turret is turned. Infantry are the tank's eyes for 360 degrees. Without eyes, 88 millimeters of caliber become a useless pipe. Third rule: psychology as a weapon. Continuous movement and changing positions created a false picture of the world for the Germans. They believed they were being attacked by superior forces. Fear is an irrational variable that forces experienced soldiers to make mistakes. The German driver of the Panther, panicking, blocked the passage. German gunners fired at shadows. This tactic did not get into official regulations immediately. Regulations are written slowly, in offices where it is quiet and smells of broadcloth. But at the front, information spreads faster than radio waves. The experience of the Hammer crew was passed on in smoking rooms, in hospitals, at transit points. Do like Kuznetsov meant think before pressing the trigger. The fate of the crew itself turned out typically for that time. War is an assembly line. It doesn't give vacations for heroism. It grinds up people and equipment, demanding new ore. Tank Hammer was repaired overnight. Replaced road wheels, poured fresh oil, tightened clutches. Screens made of bed frames were welded onto the armor, makeshift protection against Panzerfausts, which started appearing among the Germans. The machine became a combat unit again. Lieutenant Kuznetsov did not receive the Hero of the Soviet Union. The recommendation got lost somewhere in Army HQs, or perhaps that same captain decided not to push the paper, limiting himself to not court-martialing him. Kuznetsov received the Order of the Red Banner. Gunnar Voronov died 2 weeks later near Vilnius. A stray mine fragment. A stupid, accidental death outside combat, when they were simply refueling the machine. War doesn't choose moments for drama. Driver Petrov made it to Königsberg. He changed 3 tanks, burned twice, but survived. After the war, he returned to the collective farm, got on a tractor, and never talked about how he danced a waltz with a tiger in the Belarusian forest. Loder Sidorov went missing in action in Poland. Just disappeared during a night march. Their history is just one brick in the wall, but the building of victory rests on such bricks. War is heavy, dirty work. There is no place for beautiful gestures here. There are only TTH, tactical technical characteristics, TTH of the machine and TTH of the man. The machine's TTH are known: armor penetration, speed, range. The man's TTH are will, reaction speed, and the ability to step over the instinct of self-preservation. On that summer day of 1944, the crew of Hammer showed the limiting values of their human characteristics. They proved that the manual is not dogma, but a guide to action, that the rules of battle are written by the blood of those who follow them, and rewritten by the victories of those who know how to break them wisely. The forest in Quadrant 1206 has overgrown. The rusty hulks of German tanks were dragged away for scrap in the 50s, but 85 caliber casings still lie in the ground. Brass witnesses that one tank can stop an army if inside sit people who know their job. And this is the main lesson.
Technology is dead without man. The most perfect tiger is just a pile of steel if its crew has lost its spirit. And an old, worn-out T-34 becomes a weapon of vengeance if it is driven by a crew that has decided to live, or sell their death dearly. This is the bottom line. No tears, no pathos, just facts, physics, and burnt iron. End of recording. To understand the nature of this victory, one must distract oneself from beautiful words about valor and look at the physics of the process. In the bottom line, what happened in the forest quadrant is an anomaly. A statistical error that became reality thanks to the German commander's mistake and the extreme concentration of the Soviet crew. Let's break down the technical anatomy of this duel finale. The German heavy tank T-6 Tiger is the pinnacle of Wehrmacht engineering circa 1942. But by 1944, this machine, for all its power, began to lose the status of an invulnerable fortress. Its main problem is weight and inertia. 56 tons. To turn this mass in the conditions of limited space of a forest clearing, the transmission works at the limit. The hydraulic turret traverse drive depends on engine RPM. At the moment when the Tiger tried to catch Hammer in the sight, its driver mechanic made a fatal mistake. He let off the gas to maneuver the hull. Pressure in the hydraulic system dropped. Turret rotation speed decreased to critical values, about 6 degrees per second. It was these seconds that gifted life to Lieutenant Kuznetsov's crew. Now about Hammer. Tank T-34-85. Mass, 32 tons. Engine, V234, 500 horsepower. Specific power, higher than the Germans. But the main weapon here is not the gun, but dynamics. In close combat, at pistol shot range, 200 meters, armor stops playing a decisive role. Angular velocity decides. A Soviet tank passing at full speed past a static target creates an unsolvable problem for the German gunner. Angular displacement of the target exceeds the capabilities of the Tiger's aiming drives.
Speaking the language of ballistics, Hammer exited the kill zone faster than the German could traverse the gun. But Sergeant Vodonov's shot is a separate chapter in the tactics textbook. 85 millimeters, shell BR 365. Blunt-nosed, with a ballistic cap. Its feature is that it works excellently on sloped armor, biting into the metal and preventing ricochet. Range, 200 meters. Muzzle velocity, 792 meters per second. Flight time, 0.25 seconds. Practically instantaneous. Vodonov didn't hit the center of the silhouette. He hit the node, the joint of the turret and hull. This is a zone designers call weakened. The turret traverse mechanism is there, the armor is thinner there, and behind the wall lies the ready-use ammunition. A kinetic strike of such force at such range doesn't necessarily have to pierce the armor through. It is sufficient to create a stress wave inside the hull that will spall chunks of metal from the backside of the armor plate. This effect is called spall. Red-hot fragments of its own armor turn into shrapnel that hits the crew and ignites powder charges. The German tank wasn't destroyed by a hole. It was destroyed by its own design and the tightness of the fighting compartment, where any source of fire leads to a volumetric explosion. Operation Bagration in general became a graveyard for the German menagerie. The forested, swampy terrain of Belarus deprived the Wehrmacht of its main trump card, distance. Tigers and panthers were created for duels in open spaces at ranges of 1.5 to 2 kilometers, where their optics and powerful guns gave an absolute advantage. In the forest, where visibility is limited to 100 meters, they turned into clumsy elephants in a china shop. The crew of Hammer intuitively found this weakness. They forced a battle on the enemy by their own rules. They turned a tank battle into a knife fight in a phone booth, where the tiger's long barrel only got in the way, catching on trees. This is tactical anatomy. Understanding that TTH in a table and TTH in real combat are different things. In a table, a tiger kills a T-34. In a forest, at grenade-throwing distance, a T-34 kills a tiger, if a virtuoso sits at the levers and a surgeon is at the site. But behind this technical triumph hides another layer of reality: logistics. After the battle, when the adrenaline subsided, the crew faced the pros of war. Fuel consumption for 20 minutes of maneuvering combat was almost 100 liters. This is a monstrous figure. The engine, working in forced mode, ate oil. Tank hammer, despite the victory, required serious repair. On the march to Minsk, driver Petrov stopped the machine every 2 hours to check track tension. Overheated metal of the tracks stretched. If you miss the moment, the track will fly off, and the tank will stop in the middle of the offensive, blocking the road for others. And a road is an artery. A clogged artery is gangrene for an advancing army. War is not just shots. It is thousands of kilometers traveled in dust, in heat, in a constant struggle with iron that wants to break. Loader Sidorov, whose hands were raw and bloody from the breach, was now loading crates of food and spare parts. Gunner Voronov cleaned the optics, picking caked mud out of the sight crevices. Commander Kuznetsov didn't sleep, checking maps and movement schedules. Victory in battle is just the beginning of work. To get to Berlin, you need to not just know how to shoot. You need to know how to live in a machine that is trying to kill you with its vibrations, gases, and noise. The T-34 is a very harsh machine. There is no shock absorption for the human here. Every root, every stone on the road resonates in the spine. After a day of marching, tankers climb out of hatches swaying like deep old men. They go deaf from transmission noise reaching 110 decibels inside the hull. They breathe a suspension of dust and diesel fumes. It is in this state, deafened, poisoned by carbon monoxide, with shaking hands, that they enter battle and win. Not thanks to comfort, but in spite of everything. The story of the Hammer crew is indicative in one more moment: the psychology of expendable material. They knew that their tank was a resource. The average lifespan of a T-34 in the active phase of an offensive is 3 attacks, or 4 days. They had lived a month already. They had outlived their stay in this world. This knowledge did not breed fear. It bred fatalism and cold calculation. If you are destined to burn, better to do it dearly. Exchange your 32 tons of cheap Ural steel for 56 tons of expensive Krupp armor. A profitable exchange rate. The economy of war is cruel. One 85mm shell costs a few dozen rubles. A Tiger tank costs hundreds of thousands of Reichsmarks. Destroying a Tiger with one shell is not just a military success, it is an economic catastrophe for the enemy. And Lieutenant Kuznetsov, a former accountant before the war, understood this arithmetic perfectly. In the bottom line, the battle in Quadrant 1206 is an example of absolute efficiency. Minimum cost, maximum result. But reports don't write about what price this exacts on the human organism. About how Petrov threw up from overexertion after the battle, how Kuznetsov couldn't unclench his fingers gripping the tablet, how Sidorov cried in his sleep, reliving the moment when they burned in the gasoline cloud. This remains off-screen. In the frame are only burning crosses on German armor and a dusty Soviet column moving west. And the hum of motors, resembling the breathing of a huge, tired beast, doing its heavy, dirty, but necessary work.
The battle doesn't die immediately. First, the roar leaves, but the sound remains inside the skull. Ears are blocked as if lead were poured into them. This is acoustic concussion, an inevitable companion of a tanker working without normal sound insulation inside a steel bell being hit by a sledgehammer. Ringing silence. It presses on the eardrums harder than the engine roar. In the forest, in quadrant 1206, there is no more birdsong or wind noise. There is only crackling. Dry, rhythmic crackling of burning wood and the greasy, hissing sound of burning oil. Smoke covers the clearing with a dense gray blanket. It doesn't rise. Atmospheric pressure and lack of wind press it to the ground. This creates a surreal landscape. The lower part of the trees is hidden in the fog of war, and the tops, shredded by shrapnel, stick out like broken bones. The commander's cupola hatch flips back with a heavy metallic sigh. Lieutenant Kuznetsov climbs out first. His movements are slowed, devoid of that springy sharpness he had during the battle. This is the recoil effect. Adrenaline pit. The organism, having spent a week's supply of energy in 22 minutes, switches to emergency power-saving mode. He jumps to the ground. Legs buckle. The vestibular system, confused by constant shaking and turret rotation, refuses to hold the horizon. Kuznetsov leans his back against the warm, vibrating side of Hammer. The air outside is worse than inside. It is permeated with a heavy, sickly sweet smell. This is a mixture of burnt diesel fuel, melted rubber, red-hot metal, and burnt organic matter. This smell is the calling card of any successful tank battle. It eats into clothes, hair, skin pores. It is impossible to wash off with soap. It takes weeks to weather out. The rest of the crew leaves the machine. Driver-mechanic Petrov falls out of his hatch, coughing up black phlegm. His face is a coal miner's mask. The whites of his eyes on the black background seem unnaturally bright, inflamed by powder gases. Gunner Voronov and loader Sidorov slide off the stern. Sidorov's hands are shaking with such amplitude that he cannot get a match into the box. This is not fear. This is physiology. Muscles are supersaturated with lactic acid. Nerve endings are shorting out from overload. They stand silently and look at the work of their hands. Ahead, on the narrow forest road, 11 bonfires burn. It is a graveyard of equipment. An exhibition of German industrial achievements turned into scrap metal. The lead Tiger looks like an opened tin can. Its turret, torn off by the ammunition detonation, lies in the ditch, half sunk in the swampy soil. The long 88mm barrel, the pride of the Krupp concern, is bent into an arc from hitting the ground. The tank hull is still red hot. The paint on the sides has burned off, exposing gray steel that is now changing temper colors from the temperature. Inside the hull, flames roar. Fuel and oil remnants are burning out. Rare pops are heard. Small caliber shells that didn't detonate immediately are bursting. A little further, 2 Panthers. One buried its nose in a tree, knocking it down. The second stands across the road, blocking traffic. It has no external damage, except for a neat hole in the side, but thick black smoke pours from all hatches. Inside is a crematorium. The burning temperature of thermite mixtures and gunpowder is such that aluminum engine parts melt and flow in streams onto the ground. Armored personnel carriers and trucks are turned into shapeless piles of iron. Here the destruction is of a different nature, high explosive fragmentation. Light armor doesn't hold an 85 caliber hit. Sheets of metal are turned inside out, torn along weld seams. The vehicle carcasses resemble skeletons of prehistoric animals. Scattered around them are the contents of the beds, crates, helmets,
some rags. All this is covered with a layer of grey dust and soot. Kuznetsov takes a step forward, tearing himself away from the saving armor of his tank. He needs to walk. He needs to make sure this is real. Glass crunches under his boots, shards of periscopes and headlights. The ground is churned up by tracks, so not a single blade of grass remains. Black, oily mud mixed with oil and blood. He approaches the remains of the fuel truck. The tanker burst at the seam, opening its insides like a giant flower. The metal here didn't just burn, it deformed from the heat. Around is a scorched circle 30 meters in diameter. Trees at the edge of this circle stand black, without foliage, like charred matches. It was through this hell that they dashed in their tank. Kuznetsov looks at Hammer's track marks printed in the ash. It is a trajectory of madness. The track goes straight through the epicenter of the fire. Voronov approaches the commander. He has managed the trembling in his hands and is now smoking, greedily inhaling acrid shag tobacco smoke, which seems sweet compared to the stench around. "Look, Commander." He nods at the tiger. "Turret ring is clean. We didn't hit him in the ring." "Lower." Kuznetsov walks closer to the felled giant. The heat from the hull is such that at 5 meters, the skin on his face starts to dry out. He sees the impact point. A jagged wound in the side, slightly below the turret hull joint. The edges of the hole are melted. "Ricochet," states Kuznetsov. Voice hoarse, alien. "Shell went down, into the ammo rack. Lucky."
Not luck, objects Voronov. He speaks dryly, like a lecturer. Angle was extreme, but he turned the hull, exposed himself. If he stood straight, the shell would have skipped. Physics. They discuss the death of the machine as if analyzing a tractor breakdown. No emotions regarding the crew inside. German tankers for them right now are just a function that stopped working. This is a protective mechanism of the psyche. If you start thinking that inside those burning boxes were living people, you can go crazy. So they see only iron. Sidorov and Petrov wander among the trucks. They are looking for trophies. Not watches or cigarette cases, but useful things. Tools, jacks, jerry cans. War has taught thriftiness. German tools are good steel, useful for repairs. Petrov finds a whole box of wrenches thrown out of a repair truck bed by the explosion. He drags it to the tank, grunting with effort. For him, this box is more valuable than any metal. "Some water would be good," croaks Sidorov. Canteens are empty. "There was a stream over there, around the bend," Kuznetsov waves his hand. "Just be careful. Infantry might have scattered. But there is no infantry. The forest is empty. Those who survived the meat grinder caused by HE shells ran without looking back. Dropped weapons, dropped wounded, dropped everything. Panic is a terrible weapon. One tank maneuvering in smoke and firing from different points created the presence effect of a whole company. The Germans ran from a phantom. Silence becomes tangible. The fire gradually subsides, turning to smoldering. Crackling becomes less frequent. Now other sounds are audible, sounds of cooling metal. Tanks are clicking. These are thermal deformations. Huge masses of steel cooling down, contract, making sounds like groans or dull thuds. It seems the dead machines are talking to each other. Kuznetsov looks at his watch. Only 40 minutes have passed since the first shot. 40 minutes that changed the landscape of this forest forever. The road is destroyed. Craters, ruts, puddles of oil. Here, the arithmetic of destruction comes into play. Weight of a loaded shell, 16 kilograms. Ammunition expenditure, 30 shells. Total, 480 kilograms of steel and explosives, delivered exactly to the address, turned 500 tons of German equipment into scrap metal. The efficiency coefficient of the hammer crew in this battle is absolute. But there is another side. Kuznetsov feels cold sweat running down his back under his tunic. This is the realization of risk arriving. If that shell from the Tiger had gone half a meter lower, if Mechanic Petrov had hesitated for a second, if the gun had jammed, they stood on the edge of the abyss, and they know it. The lieutenant's gaze falls on his own tank. Hammer stands amidst the ruin, black, dirty, but whole. Steam is rising from its armor too. It looks like a predator that has just mauled a pack of wolves and is now resting, breathing heavily. On the left side is a deep furrow from shrapnel or a glancing hit from a small caliber shell. Paint stripped to metal, a shiny trace visible. A scar. Another scar on the machine's body. "Commander!" Petrov's shout brings him out of the stupor. "Hear that?" Kuznetsov listens. Through the crackle of fires and ringing in ears, a new sound breaks through. Even, growing rumble. Motorcycle. The sound approaches from the east. From our side. This means loneliness is over. Now, reality will arrive in the form of regulations, shoulder boards, and questions. Now the time of physics ends, and the time of jurisprudence begins. Kuznetsov buttons the top button of his tunic. He wipes his hands on his breeches, trying to wipe off the ingrained soot, but it is useless. He adjusts his belt with the TT holster. "Crew, to the machine!" he commands.
Voice sounds quiet, but in the silence of the forest, it is heard distinctly. They approach the tank. 4 men looking like devils from the underworld, dirty, exhausted, with red eyes. They don't look like poster heroes. They look like workers who just finished the hardest shift of their lives, a shift of destroying matter. They stand in a line in front of the tank, waiting. The landscape after the battle freezes. Smoke slowly crawls along the ground, enveloping boots. The burning Tiger behind them serves as a grim background for this mise en scène. Court-martial or medal, execution or glory. In this moment, they don't care. They are alive, and that is the only fact that matters in the ringing silence of the Belarusian forest. The clatter of the motorcycle's single-cylinder engine fades, but silence does not ensue. Following the courier's motorcycle, breaking bushes with its bumper, a command Gaz 67B rolls out onto the clearing. The car moves heavily, in low gear, splashing mud from under the wheels. Authority has arrived. Not the kind in offices, but the kind that has the right to execute on the spot without trial or investigation in wartime conditions. A colonel climbs out of the car, regimental commander, a stout, stocky man with a sallow face into which road dust has eaten. His tunic is unbuttoned, revealing an undershirt wet with sweat. On his side is a TT holster, worn to yellowness. He doesn't look at the crew. He looks at the map he clutches in his hand, and at the smoking forest. Lieutenant Kuznetsov stands at attention. His crew behind his back are dirty, ragged statues. They know. Their fate is being decided right now. The internal service regulations and the disciplinary regulations of the Red Army interpret their actions unambiguously. Unauthorized change of combat mission, violation of stealth regime, unmasking of the regiment's position. In conditions of preparation for a breakthrough, this qualifies as criminal negligence, or even aiding the enemy. The colonel takes 3 heavy steps toward the tank. His boots squelch in the mess of oil and soil. He raises his eyes to Kuznetsov. The gaze is heavy, unblinking. There is no gratitude in this gaze. In it is the rage of a man whose plan of covert deployment has just collapsed. Who is the commander? The colonel's voice is quiet, but grinding metal is heard in it. Guards Lieutenant Kuznetsov, answers the hammer commander.
He makes no excuses. Voice dry as a cracking branch. "Do you know, Lieutenant, what you've done?" The colonel comes up close. He smells of tobacco and cognac. "You opened up the quadrant. The Germans now know we are here. You exposed the artillery tractors coming behind to a strike. I was reported shooting in the area of responsibility. I drove here to personally put a bullet in your forehead for panic-mongering." Kuznetsov is silent. He has nothing to say. From the point of view of regimental tactics, the colonel is right. One shot in the forest can disrupt an army-scale operation. "Report the situation," growls the colonel, not taking his eyes off the lieutenant's face. "Mixed enemy column destroyed," Kuznetsov recites. "One heavy tank T-6 Tiger, 2 medium tanks T-5 Panther, 4 armored personnel carriers, transport with fuel and ammunition. Breakthrough to division headquarters prevented. No losses among personnel and materiel." The colonel freezes. He slowly shifts his gaze from the lieutenant to the road. The smoke has cleared a bit, and now the panorama of destruction is visible in all its monstrous beauty. He sees the Tiger. This sight breaks his anger. The colonel is an old tanker. He went from Moscow to Belarus. He knows the price of a Tiger. He knows that usually, destroying one such monster requires a platoon of T-34s and a battery of ZIS-3s.
And usually half of ours burn in the process.
Here stands a single T-34-85, and the German heavyweight lies in the ditch with a torn-off turret. The colonel walks silently to the German tank. He walks around craters, steps over debris. He walks up to the side of the Tiger and runs his palm over the armor. The metal is still hot. He looks at the hole, looks at the entry angle, looks at the distance. A calculator works in his head. He correlates facts. 1 machine, 1 crew, against 11, in full encirclement, with violation of orders. He turns to the Panthers, sees the one that burned from a side hit, sees the second one jammed on the road. He sees the burnt fuel trucks. This is not just a battle. This is the work of a virtuoso butcher. The colonel understands that if Kuznetsov had followed the order and stayed silent, this column would have emerged in the regiment's rear in 10 minutes, and then losses would have been in the hundreds. HQ, comms, depots, everything would have been crushed by the tracks of these 3 beasts. Lieutenant Kuznetsov saved not just the HQ, he saved the colonel's career, and possibly his life. The colonel returns to the formation. His gait has changed. Rage has gone, giving way to heavy, masculine fatigue and cynical understanding of the situation. He stands before Kuznetsov, looks at him for a long time. "You're a fool, Lieutenant," he says finally, taking out a cigarette case. "And your initiative is foolish, execution-worthy." He clicks a lighter, lights a cigarette, inhales deeply, and blows smoke toward Kuznetsov. "According to regulations, I should arrest you, hand you over to the special department, and they'll shoot you, because an order is an order. Discipline is the cement of the army. If everyone starts shooting whenever they feel like it, we'll lose the war." The pause hangs in the air, heavy as a kettlebell. The crew doesn't breathe. Voronov clenches his fists so hard his knuckles turn white. "But," the colonel spits out tobacco crumbs, "winners aren't judged, as long as they are needed alive." He nods at the burning column. "Is this your work?" "The crew's, Comrade Colonel. The crew's." The colonel chuckles, but his eyes remain cold. "Listen to my command. Rewrite the report. Write that the column stumbled upon your ambush itself, that you were discovered and forced to accept battle for self-defense. Got it?" No initiative, no saving HQ, just self-defense. That way the prosecutor will have less work, and I'll have less paperwork. Yes, sir, Comrade Colonel. And remember, Kuznetsov. The colonel's voice becomes hard again like a whip crack. This was the first and last time. Violate radio silence again without a direct threat to life, I will shoot you personally in front of the formation. Hero or not, I don't give a damn. Everyone is equal in the grave. I understand, Comrade Colonel.
The colonel looks at Tank Hammer. Machine operational? Yes, sir. Oil and ammo top-up required. Rubber on road wheels burned off. We'll find rubber. Get oil from my techs. In 2 hours, the regiment begins moving out. Your place is in the lead patrol. Since you're so smart and sharp-eyed, you go first. You'll probe the German defenses. This is a sentence. Lead patrol is a suicide mission. The first tank to run into anti-tank defenses. Life expectancy in patrol is until the enemy's first shot. The colonel doesn't reward them. He uses their resource to the end. He understands. This crew is charmed. They have luck, or talent. So maximum benefit must be squeezed from this talent for the regiment. Thank you for the trust, answers Kuznetsov without a shadow of irony. Don't mention it, throws the colonel, turning toward the car. This is war, Lieutenant. They don't thank you here. Here you survive at the expense of others' death. You killed a lot of Germans today. Means a lot of ours will stay alive. It's simple arithmetic. He climbs into the gas. The driver starts the engine. Submit recommendation for awards to the Chief of Staff. Throws the colonel on the move, not turning around. Maybe they'll give a red star. Maybe not. Your main reward is that I didn't shoot you. See ya. The car tears off, spraying the crew with a new portion of mud. Kuznetsov stands looking after the departing brass. The tension that held him in a vice for the last hour releases. Legs turn to cotton. He sits right on the ground, leaning his back against the track. Close call, exhales Sidorov. I thought that was it. Curtains. Smart guy, says Voronov, looking at the cigarette butt thrown by the colonel. Pragmatic. Why shoot us? We're still useful. We're like a penal battalion now, just without the sentence. We'll atone with blood. In patrol. Patrol it is, shrugs Petrov. At least you can see where you're going there. Not sitting in bushes. The crew's dialogue is short, chopped. No joy. Only the realization that a reprieve has been granted. Death passed by, touching them with its cold wing, but didn't take them. It gave them more time. Maybe a day. Maybe a week. This is the clash of regulations and reality. Regulations require obedience. Reality requires results. Today, reality won. 11 burning Wehrmacht machines outweighed a paragraph on paper. This is the highest justice of war. Cruel, cynical, but honest. Kuznetsov takes the map out of the tablet. He needs to plot a route. Lead patrol. This means they will be alone again. Again in front. Again target number 1. But now they have experience. They know the tiger is mortal. They know an order can be violated if the price is life. And they know a court-martial is scarier than a German gun, only because it hits you in the back. And you can negotiate with a gun, with the help of an armor-piercing shell. Start her up, Petrov, commands the lieutenant. Time for oil. War doesn't wait. Hammer's engine comes alive again. This sound is not just mechanical noise. It is the sound of life, continuing despite everything. Despite logic, despite statistics, despite orders. The tank slowly turns around,
leaving behind the burning graveyard of German ambitions. Ahead is the road to Minsk, a road paved with fire and iron, and they will travel it to the end, or until the first direct hit. There is no third option. The rumble of the T-34's engine dissolved in the morning mist, but they were not destined to go far. War, as is known, consists not only of battles, but also of reports, maps, and heavy stares from command. Before an hour had passed, Willises of Headquarters Reconnaissance jumped out to meet Hammer, covered in soot and mud. The meeting promised nothing good. On the hood of the lead car stood a colonel with a face twisted in rage. It was the division chief of staff. Behind him, kicking up dust, moved a reinforcement column. The very forces that were supposed to meet the enemy if Lieutenant Kuznetsov's crew hadn't decided the fate of the battle on their own. Kuznetsov ordered the engine killed. The silence that fell in the forest was heavy, like before a storm. The crew climbed out. Dirty, smelling of gunpowder, sweat, and burnt oil, they lined up in front of the tank. Hands trembled, not from fear of the enemy, but from the come-down after the adrenaline storm. The colonel jumped off the jeep without even waiting for a full stop. He walked toward them, and every step beat out the rhythm of the looming court-martial. "Kuznetsov!" The colonel's voice broke into a squeal. "Do you realize what you've done? You broke radio silence. You violated a direct order from Stavka. Insubordination. Want a court-martial? I will shoot you personally in front of the formation." The lieutenant stood still, looking straight ahead. He knew the colonel was right. By all laws of the manual, he had committed a crime. The order was to stand quietly. He opened fire. In the army, such mathematics usually ends at a firing squad wall. Behind the chief of staff's back, figures of NKVD officers with their characteristic cornflower blue collar tabs already loomed. They looked at the crew not as heroes, but as suspects. Sidorov swallowed nervously. Petrov lowered his head, examining the toes of his boots. Only Voronov remained imperturbable, as if carved from stone. He had done his job. "Comrade Colonel," quietly but firmly began Kuznetsov. "Permission to report." "Silence!" barked the officer. "Surrender weapons. All four under arrest. Seal the tank." It seemed this was the end. A finale not heroic, but bureaucratic, stupid and merciless. But at that moment, another car drove up to the group. A general, the division commander, stepped out of it. He was calmer, but his gaze was heavier than lead. He walked up to Kuznetsov, cast a glance over the exhausted tankers, then looked at the sooty muzzle brake of Hammer. "Report, Lieutenant," uttered the general. "But keep it short. Why did you violate the order?" "Germans were moving into the rear, Comrade General. A tank column. If we had let them pass, they would have struck the headquarters and artillery. We had no comms. The decision was made by me, personally." The general squinted. "A tank column? Here? Intel reported the sector clear. How many units?" 11, Comrade General. Heavy tank, mediums, armored personnel carriers, fuel trucks." The colonel standing nearby snorted. "He's lying about everything." "Fear has big eyes." 11 units? And you, what, stopped them? With one crew? Don't make me laugh, Kuznetsov. You just got scared of a patrol and started firing into the white light, giving away the whole division's position. Kuznetsov didn't answer. He simply pointed his hand back to where plumes of black, greasy smoke were still rising. "Permission to show, Comrade General. Everything is visible there." The general nodded silently and gestured for everyone to get in the cars. Kuznetsov was put in a Willys with the NKVD men. They drove in silence. In a few minutes, the forest parted, and a picture opened up before the command that couldn't be invented in any report. The road was a graveyard of metal. It was an avenue of death created by the hands of 4 men. The first thing that struck the eyes was the smog. Thick, acrid smell of burnt rubber, paint, and human flesh. The entire German column stood where retribution overtook it. The general got out of the car and slowly walked along the road. He walked past the burning hulk of a medium tank, past an overturned truck, past mangled armored personnel carriers. He saw how competently, with surgical precision, the strikes were delivered. In the center of this chaos towered the Tiger. A mighty machine, the pride of German tank building, now stood a lifeless pile of steel. The turret frozen in an unfinished turn, a black hole in the armor joint gaped like a deadly wound of a beast. The general stopped near it, took off his cap, and ran a hand over his forehead. He was an experienced military man. He had gone through the Civil War. He had seen a lot. But he was seeing something like this for the first time. 11, he whispered. Really 11? He turned to the chief of staff. The man stood pale, having lost all his fervor. Arguments about regulations and court-martial crumbled to dust before the face of this burning reality. One Soviet tank destroyed a reinforced enemy company without receiving a single scratch. It was impossible, but it was a fact. The general beckoned Kuznetsov and Voronov. "Who shot?" he asked, pointing at the Tiger. "Sergeant Voronov, Comrade General," answered Kuznetsov. "How?" The general shifted his gaze to the gunner. "How did you guess to hit exactly like that? First the center, then the tail." Voronov adjusted his headset. "Tactics, Comrade General. Germans love order. When order is disrupted, they get lost. If we had hit head-on, the lead tank would have accepted battle, and the rest would have deployed into battle formation. But this way, we created a jam, locked them in. They blocked themselves. They had nowhere to go. In the forest, equipment without maneuver is just targets, and we cut off the infantry to gouge their eyes out. A tank without infantry in the forest is blind." The general listened attentively, like a student at a lecture. He understood that he was hearing not just the excuse of a violator, but the birth of something new. "And the Tiger?" he asked. "Why did you wait? That's a risk." "He was the strongest, but also the clunkiest," calmly answered Voronov. "While he was turning, we were picking off the small fry. I knew he would look for us. Waited until he showed his side. You can't take him head on, but under the turret, on the turn, metal is weaker there." The general was silent for a long time. He looked at his soldiers, then at the destroyed enemy. A complex struggle was happening in his head. On one side, iron discipline, on which the army rests. On the other, a brilliant result that saved hundreds, maybe thousands of lives of his soldiers. If this column had passed, only a wet spot would have remained of the division headquarters. "All right then," the general finally uttered, putting on his cap. "Colonel, annul the arrest order." The chief of staff tried to object. "But Comrade General, discipline. If everyone starts fighting like this, Colonel, we'll finish the war in Berlin in a month," cut him off the general. "Winners aren't judged, especially such winners." He walked up close to the crew. "Listen to me carefully, sons. For insubordination, I should have demoted you and sent you to a penal battalion. You risked not only yourselves, but the success of the whole operation. But you won, and your victory is worth more than any regulations. You saved the division. You showed that the Russian soldier knows how to fight not by numbers, but by skill." The general took out a cigarette case from his pocket, took out a cigarette, but didn't light it. I will recommend everyone for awards. Kuznetsov, Voronov, for Hero of the Soviet Union. The rest, for Orders of the Red Banner. But that's not the main thing. Voronov, your battle, your scheme. I will order it documented. The special officers will describe everything by the minute, every shot, every maneuver. This isn't just luck. This is science. We will teach others this, so they know how to beat the fascist, even when he is 10 times stronger. The story of the Hammer crew did not end in that Belarusian forest. It only began. The rumor of a mad tank that single-handedly burned a whole German column flew across the front faster than Information Bureau reports. Tankers from other units retold this battle as a legend, adding details that weren't there, but keeping the essence. Do not fear the enemy's strength. Look for his weakness. Voronov's tactics, striking vulnerable communication nodes of the enemy, creating artificial jams, methodically shooting a panicking enemy, really did enter textbooks. Later, after the war, in military academies, cadets analyzed this battle on diagrams. It was called a fire sack in conditions of limited maneuver. Dry lines in tactics textbooks hid behind them the sweat, soot, and 30 minutes of extreme tension of that summer day in 1944. But for the crew itself, the most important thing was not recognition, and not gold stars on tunics. The most important thing was the feeling that arose in them when the general shook their hands. The feeling that they were not cogs in a huge war machine, but people capable of changing the course of history. They stood by their tank, their iron comrade who didn't let them down. Steel was cooling on the armor, but the heart of the machine, its crew, beat steadily. "Well, Lieutenant," grinned Petrov, wiping his hands with a rag. "Turns out we'll live some more." "We'll live," nodded Kuznetsov, looking east where the sun of a new day was already rising. "We'll definitely live. We still have to drive to Berlin, and the road is long." The war continued. Somewhere cannons thundered. Somewhere regiments went on the attack. But here, on the narrow forest road, silence fell. Silence paid for with courage and ingenuity. The T-34 tank, a simple Soviet tank, proved that even one man in the field is a warrior if he knows what he is fighting for and knows how to fight with his mind. The enemy was defeated, humiliated, and destroyed. And 4 tankers just did their job. The hardest job in the world, defending their motherland. And when, years later, historians argue about the reasons for victory, sorting through steel production figures and gun calibers, this episode will remain an eternal reminder. Victory is forged not only by factories and generals. Victory is forged by people. People who are capable of seeing the moment of truth and taking a step toward death to turn it into life. People who know that sometimes you need to break a rule to save the main thing: humanity and freedom. Hammer clanked its tracks, turning around to follow the general's car. The crew took their places. The battle is over, but the war is not yet. And they were ready for it like never before.